So here's a fascinating puzzle. Across Europe, pretty much all the security services view the Muslim Brotherhood as a major threat. And yet, most countries won't take that final step and officially label it a terrorist organization. It's this contradiction that's really at the heart of Europe's relationship with the group, and today we're going to unpack exactly why that is.
Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll dig a little deeper into that European puzzle. Then we have to go back to the beginning, tracing the Brotherhood's journey from Egypt all the way to Europe. You'll see how that history has led to a really fractured response today, which brings us to the core dilemma: to ban or not to ban? And finally, we'll look at what this whole struggle might mean for the future of the continent.
All right, so let's dive right into this central puzzle, what we're calling the continental contradiction.
Okay, this is the heart of it. Just about every security service in Europe sees the Muslim Brotherhood as a problem, a long-term threat. But there's no agreement across the continent to just call it a terrorist group. So what's with the disconnect? How can both of those things be true at the same time? That's the big question we need to get to the bottom of.
But hey, don't mistake that lack of a unified label for inaction, because the tide is absolutely turning. All across Europe, governments are starting to take apart that lenient, kind of hands-off environment that for a long time let these groups operate pretty freely. So, to really understand how we got here, we need to trace the group's path, from its beginnings in Egypt to how it put down roots all across Europe.
So, where did it all begin? You have to go all the way back to 1928. The Muslim Brotherhood was started by a guy named Hassan al-Banna. And its original goal? Well, it was meant to be an ideological pushback against what he saw as the growing westernization of Egypt, which, you have to remember, was under British influence at the time.
The story starts in Egypt, sure, but the chapter that really matters for Europe kicks off in the 1960s. Brotherhood leaders were fleeing persecution back home, and they found refuge on the continent. And from there, they started building this really complex web of organizations. It's not one single group. It's more of a network, designed to spread their ideology. And for a long time, European governments barely put up any resistance.
And that whole history brings us right back to today, and the big question of how European nations are dealing with it now. And this is where you really see a fractured response, because the continent is seriously divided on this.
Just look at the spectrum of responses here. On one end, you've got Austria, which has gone for an outright ban. Germany is now looking really closely at doing the same thing. France is leading the charge with official inquiries and kicking key figures out. And the UK, which was known for being lenient for so long, is clearly changing its tune. There is no one-size-fits-all playbook in Europe.
Let's start with Austria, because they've taken the most aggressive legal approach. Back in June 2021, it became the very first European country to formally ban the Brotherhood. The government there has been really clear, identifying what it calls political Islam, the push for political power based on an Islamist ideology, as a top national threat. They're even beefing up their watchdog group that focuses specifically on this issue.
Now in Germany, the debate over banning the Brotherhood is happening inside a much bigger security crackdown. The government's already doing things like introducing temporary border controls and starting deportations in other situations. So this whole tightening security climate is the world in which this potential ban is being seriously discussed. The situation in France is wow. It's pretty striking. French intelligence thinks that membership in groups connected to the Brotherhood has almost doubled since 2019. It's now at about 100,000 people. That kind of rapid growth is a huge reason why the French government is taking such a hard line. And this quote from the French Interior Minister, it just gets right to the core of their concern. When he calls the group an insidious enemy, he's saying the threat isn't just about violence, he's talking about a long-term, slow-burn strategy of ideological infiltration aimed at quietly changing French society from the inside out. And finally, let's turn to the UK. After a big decision back in 2014 not to classify the group as a terrorist organization, Britain was seen by many as a safe haven. But yeah, that open-door policy is definitely starting to close.
Okay, so all of this brings us to the central policy challenge for the entire continent, the designation dilemma: to ban or not to ban.
And this is the ultimate catch-22. On the one hand, if everyone designated the group, it would make it way easier to share intel and take coordinated legal action. But here's the big worry. A ban might just push these groups underground, forcing them to operate in what one source called tunnels of secrecy, which would actually make them even harder to track.
So where does all of this leave Europe? Let's get to our final section. A shadow over Europe? What does the future look like?
So, let's quickly recap where we are right now. The Brotherhood has a very real, very substantial presence. They often use these quiet, underground methods to spread their ideas, sometimes tapping into the growing number of Muslim immigrants.
And on the other side, as we've seen, European governments are pushing back, tightening the rules. It's a constant push and pull.
And that leaves us with the one big provocative question that really defines this whole challenge. As governments keep cracking down, will they actually succeed in neutralizing the ideology? Or will it just adapt, finding new, sneakier, and even harder to trace ways to survive and spread? That right there is the fundamental unknown.